Knowing the best way to harvest and preserve your herbs is going to be the difference between having the maximum medicinal and flavor benefits or sacrificing some of them. So one of the most important things you need to know when you're harvesting your herbs is you want to do it in the cool of the morning, before the sun has begun to hit them and just as the dew is beginning to dry off of them. So we don't want them sopping wet in the morning with all of the dew. But the reason that we want to do this is because when we're harvesting them, the essential oils that are in the plant, in the morning time, they're at their highest concentration in both the flowers and the leaves. If you wait until later in the day, when the heat and the sun has hit them, they go back into the stems and back into the root of the plant. So morning time is also my favorite time, especially during the summer, to be out in the garden because it's when it's cool. So we're going to be harvesting, these are my chamomile, and in the morning you'll also notice that the little white petals are tucked down. It's kind of like they're being shy instead of fully out. So that's a good sign too that it's still early enough in the day to be harvesting these. And as you can see, this plant has a ton of blossoms all over it. And so to sit and pluck each of these by hand is going to take forever. They make some rakes that you can get that you can pull them off and you can harvest them that way. But with the old-fashioned method that I like to use to dry these, I find it easiest to just come in here, and that way I'm not touching all of the petals and the blossoms. And I just come to the base here. Scissors work, you can use pruning shears, and we're just going to trim these off and put them here in our basket. The other great thing about doing this is with your flowering herbs, the more you harvest from them, the more they will put up more blossoms. So you're going to get more flowers and for beauty as well as to put into your herbal medicine cabinet. So here I have my Feverfew, and I've actually already harvested from this once this year, and it's already sent out a bunch of new blossoms. So I'm just going to come down here and clip it off at the bottom. Now this is my elderberry flower, and on your elderberry plant, both the berries and the flower are edible and actually pretty much a powerhouse as far as we're talking in your natural medicine cabinet, especially for their immune boosting properties and also antiviral. However, this is the first year that this has bloomed, and unfortunately my pollinator to this one did not put up a bloom yet this year. So that means I missed the blossom time on these ones over here, but because they didn't have anything to pollinate them, they're not going to form into berries. So I want to make sure that I get this large flower harvested while it's still fresh so that I can use this. So you can see that one. It's just so lacy and beautiful. It's almost hard to harvest it, but it's going to be great in teas and tinctures. Now, one of the other herbs that I'm harvesting this morning is my holy basil or tulsi. And again, I actually just harvested off of this holy basil plant less than 2 weeks ago. So sometimes you're going to see when you're harvesting them, you're like, oh man, you're taking everything. But these herbs do really well when you do a hard harvest like that, and they'll produce a bunch more for you. These are really easy to harvest because we're going for some of these longer stalks. The main thing is you just want to be careful that you're not crushing the leaves or the flower when you're cutting these and harvesting them. We don't want to release any of these oils in there now. We want to release them when we're going to use them. So light handling is fine. So over here, I've got my peppermint. So I've got mint peppermint here, and then I've actually got some chocolate mint in here, which unfortunately does not actually taste like chocolate. It just has a brown stem. I have to tell you, I was highly disappointed because I thought it would have like chocolate overtones. Yeah, totally doesn't, but it's still a great mint. And I've harvested from these already, and I probably should have come out here and harvested a little bit earlier. So you want to make sure that you're not getting, like, a lot of these leaves are just getting old, and so they've got some sun spots and a little bit of damage on them, a little bit of yellowing. These ones are not ideal to harvest. You really want to go for the ones that are bright and green and don't have very few, if any, blemishes on the leaves. In fact, no blemishes is actually ideal. So for these with the mint, we're just going to come down, and I'm just going to get the ones up here that are still nice and bright, and I'm not going to try and harvest down here where these ones are older. So I'm just going to come right here. So these are going to be shorter little stems, but that's okay. So we've got one left to fill up our basket here, and that is my lemon balm. So this I just started from seed and planted this year, and so you can see it's already filling out pretty fast. Lemon balm's in the mint family, so it likes to spread. But just like mint, we want to make sure that we're just getting this bright green part, not any of these older leaves that are showing anything. And we're going to come down here to the stem part, and I'm going to trim or prune, cut it right there. And again, try to be, you'll have a little bit of a light scent. The mint family, especially with the lemon balm and the peppermint, have a really high concentration of the oils, and so they're very fragrant. The more fragrant the herb, the more you'll smell that. But ideally, we don't want to handle them and crush them and release these oils too soon. So now that we have all of our herbs harvested, it is time to get them drying. And you've got several options. The easiest option, and definitely the most old-fashioned, is to take them in bundles. And this works just really well with these ones that we've cut and we kind of have longer here. So I'm going to bundle them together here with some more of my Feverfew. And one of the key things to keep in mind as you create your bundles is you don't want them to actually be too large, because we do want to make sure that we've got adequate airflow. So I'm going to put these together like this. So we've got all of the stems here at the top kind of together. And then you can take twine, you can take string, whatever you've got. And we're going to tie these all together at the base. And I've found it kind of works a little bit right here where I've got like this stem coming out, because as these dry, they will shrink. And if I can kind of thread it through a couple areas where there's a little bit of stems, as they dry and shrink up, it just kind of helps to keep them from falling out, basically. And then I usually just do a little bit of a slip knot, so I've got something, a loop for where I'm hanging it. So you can hang these in various places. The biggest thing is you don't want them to be in direct sunlight, and you want it to be an area where they have good airflow. So we're not building a fire this time of year, but I happen to have these hooks here, and in the late evening, all throughout the night, we open up the windows, so there's quite a bit of airflow that actually happens through here. And so I can just take those and put them there. So this is the Feverfew that I harvested a few weeks back. And then this was some mint that I also harvested a couple. So I'll show you some of the tips to know that those are ready to go into storage. But you want to hang them upside down. And the reason we want to hang them upside down is so that all of those essential oils that we have been careful as we've been creating these, so that we weren't bruising the leaves, and that we were harvesting them in the morning when the greatest concentration is present. We want it to all go down into the blossoms and the leaves as it's drying. So that's one of the reasons that we hang these upside down. So we don't want them to be in direct sunlight. So like I said, plenty of airflow. This is a great, and we're just gonna let them air dry. We don't wanna do these bundles too large, because then you don't have airflow. And if you have a lot of the green stems together and you've got them bundled too largely, you can get mold growth that will happen in there. So I like to do mine in some of those smaller bundles. But if you're like me, I have a lot more harvested than I've got hanging space here. So we need to have a couple other options, especially if you live in an area that's really humid. You can have trouble with airflow. It's so humid that mold will begin to grow on them. So we've got some different options. But one of the most important things is we don't want a lot of heat. So the oven is really not a good idea for dehydrating things like your herbs, especially when you're planning on using them medicinal wise. We don't want to use the oven. But the dehydrator is okay to use, provided that you have a dehydrator that goes down low enough. So this dehydrator I've had for, oh my goodness, a number of years. It's a Nesco, and I can control the temperature on this and put it all the way down to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's still considered raw. I'm not cooking the herbs. It's not really using heat. It's just more airflow. So if you live in an area with high humidity, like I said, or you don't have enough space, I don't have enough space to dry all of these, then I definitely will use my dehydrator, making sure that it stays on that 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And I really like to use it, things like the Chamomile Blossoms. These little flower heads here, I mean, this is pretty dense. This is pretty thick here in comparison to just the leaves. So you can see this is just a flat green leaf. Well, this has a lot of plant material there. And so I like to use the dehydrator on things like this that are a little bit thicker. So I'll use the dehydrator for them. And also when I've harvested things like some of my holy basil wasn't long enough, it didn't have a long enough stem. I really can't tie this very effectively, but this is a lot of good leaf material and I still want to be able to dehydrate that. So those are some different things that you may pick and choose when you would use the dehydrator versus when you would use the hanging method. So I'm going to be putting quite a bit of my chamomile blossoms here so that they have that good airflow because they are more dense. But even if you don't have a dehydrator, we still have a very old-fashioned method that can work really well for you. So a paper bag, just a brown paper bag. This one has a little bit of ink on it, not a big deal, but a brown paper bag can work really well. So this is when you don't have a dehydrator, but you have quite a bit of plant material like I do here. And so we're gonna put this in the brown paper bag because it's breathable. Now I've tried this in the past. I tried drying stinging nettle leaves in a pillowcase and they all molded. The pillowcase was either not the right type of fabric or I just didn't have enough airflow. So the brown paper bag, I feel like is a better way to go versus using the pillowcase. I didn't have very good luck with the pillowcase. You still wanna make sure that what you're putting in there is loose enough, like you don't wanna pack it down super tight. And that's another thing. You wanna make sure that we're not crushing any of the leaves or the flower blossoms during this phase when we're picking or where we're getting ready to dehydrate them. So some people will choose to take, like for example, here with the holy basil or the mint or the leaves, and they will pull all the leaves off right now and just put the leaves on a tray. I don't like to do that because you are still pulling and crushing and touching some of these leaves. I feel like it's a lot easier to just lay them on whole like this and let them dry. And then once they're dried, so when they're fully dried like this with our mint, then I can just easily pull off this leaf and I haven't crushed anything or lost any of those great essential oils that are in there. I just find it easier and it's a lot faster to pull them off when they're dry than to do it when they're fresh. So for me, it's kind of a time saver and also making sure I'm keeping all those essential oils inside. So in this bag, we're gonna go ahead and load this up with all of the chamomile. And you could put the Feverfew in here. I'm just gonna do all of the chamomile in here because I have quite a bit. You can mix them up if you want. With herbs like this that don't have super strong aromas, it's fine if you dehydrate them together. So we've got that loosely done in there. And now we're going to take this to the drying area. And I'm gonna just fold this over just once. So even though these are enclosed in the brown paper bag, we still don't want to put them in direct sunlight. So I'm actually going to hang these in the same place that I've been curing my garlic. So not in direct sunlight, but plenty of airflow. And this if we have a really hot day, this can get about 85 degrees, but the majority of the time it's going to be more around the 70s this time of year for us. But the great thing about using this paper bag is it contains everything and it's breathable, but it keeps the dust and the flies and the bugs from landing on our herbs as they're dehydrating. So it helps to protect them. So I will check on these in a couple of days. You do want to check on them when you have them in a bag format like this, and you even want to check on them too when they're hanging upside down, just to make sure that you don't see any mold starting to develop. Because if they do start to mold, you want to remove that as soon as possible so it doesn't spread throughout the entire bag. Now, when it comes to your herbs being fully dehydrated and storage time, there's another key thing that you need to know to make sure that you're not releasing all of those wonderful properties that we've been trying to preserve inadvertently. So once your herbs are fully dehydrated, first off, we want to check them. We want to make sure they're really dehydrated. With leaves, it's really easy. They're going to be curled up, they're going to be wrinkly, they're going to be dry. And if you do take them between your fingers and go like that, they're going to kind of crumble. So you can crumble them. So this is how we know that these are fully dry and they're ready to go into storage. Now with flower blossoms, it takes the blossoms longer to dehydrate, in my experience, than it does the leaves. So these are definitely smaller. So they have shriveled up, they've changed color, they're not as bright. But if you push them between your fingers, there's still some give. I can still feel in that where the petals are attached. I can still feel that it kind of gives back and forth. So if you're pushing on it and you can feel some give, then you know it's not fully dehydrated and you want to let these hang for a little bit longer, because if you try to put them into storage too soon, they'll mold on you. And so you want to make sure that those flower heads especially are all the way dry. Now, some people with flower heads, especially with things like calendula that are larger, they'll pluck the petals off and dry them that way, which can be faster. But I gotta tell you, I am not gonna sit and pluck petals off of all of these in order to dehydrate them. I would rather just let them dehydrate for a couple more weeks than try to take the time to individually pluck all of them. That would just take forever, and nobody's got time for that, right? So these need to dehydrate for a little bit longer. But when they are fully dehydrated and are ready to go into storage, one of the mistakes that people make is they will take their dehydrated leaves and or their flowers, and because when we're buying tea from the store, oftentimes it's in the bag or loose leaf, it'll already be cut up and like ready to go into a tea bag or a tea strainer, but you don't want to do that. The reason is because when you have lots of little surfaces, then there's more oxidization that's going to happen a lot faster, because more of the plant material is exposed to oxygen when it's all crumbled and broken up versus when it's like a whole leaf. So for storage, you want to put it into your jar, and I usually use glass jars. You can use regular mason jars. This is a Weck jar. You can use the Fido jars, but you do want to make sure that they have some type of a seal. So this has that rubber gasket seal there. And so these are those peppermint leaves. And we're going to go ahead and put them into here. So I can actually untie these. So now we've got all of our leaves off, and we're going to put them in here, and we're going to seal this up, and they've all been left whole. So the importance of this is because we don't want to release all of those oils that we've so carefully preserved until right at time of use. So right when you go to make your tea, or perhaps you're doing a tincture with these dried leaves, that is at the point when then you will crumble them up, because at that point when they're crumbled up, then it releases all of those oils and infuses it into whatever liquid, if you're doing an herbal tea or infusion, a decoction, or a tincture. But you don't want to do it prior to that. So for storage, it's going to be whole. And then when we're wanting to extract all of the wonderful medicinal values from said tea, or leaves, I should say, that we may be making into our tea or some of those other things, then you're going to be crumbling them up. And if you want to learn more about how to use herbs naturally in your medicine cabinet, you're going to want to make sure that you are signed up for my free herbal class, and check out the Pioneering Today Academy with our natural herbal flus and cold remedies course.